Hello and welcome to the Home and Energy Chats. My name is Heather Chandler, and I am the owner and publisher of the Green and Healthy Maine magazines. Each episode and the Home and Energy Chats, and every episode we chat with industry experts to help you learn about creating efficient, healthy, and sustainable homes. And today I am very excited to dive into a great new resource for Mainers who are interested in learning about creating ADUs, also called uh, in-law flats, accessory apartments. And as you will see, it's a comprehensive resource for learning about and exploring possibilities of maximizing this housing potential on your property. And so in a moment, I'm going to introduce our panelists. But first, I would like to start by sharing a special thank you to our sponsors, including our annual sponsor, Royal River Heat Pumps, a locally owned and operated company that is nationally recognized for heat pump excellence and 100% committed to the highest standards of quality installations, service practices, and customer satisfaction. You can find more about them online at royalriverheatpumps.com. And also to our episode sponsor today, Kennebunk Savings. Kennebunk Savings is excited to offer accessory dwelling unit loans, supporting our communities with flexible financing for today's housing needs, subject to credit approval. Helping happens here, member FDIC, equal housing lender. So thank you to both of our sponsors. And now a little bit about us. Green and Healthy Maine Homes is dedicated to inspiring healthy, efficient, and sustainable future-ready Maine homes. In addition to these home and energy chats, we publish the Green and Healthy Maine Homes magazine. You can see some of our back covers here. We host the Green Home and Energy Show, which is coming up March 28th in South Portland. That's a great day-long event with vendors. We have 20 workshops, electric vehicle showcase outside. It's an excellent opportunity to learn. And we also recently launched the Green Home and Design Awards, and those take place in the fall. So you can learn all about all of this and more on our website, greenmainhomes.com. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Tom Bell is the Communications Director at Greater Portland Council of Governments. He previously worked as a reporter for the Portland Press Herald, Maine Sunday Telegram, covering beats that included business, the Portland waterfront, and state politics. He's also a documentary filmmaker. Welcome, Tom.
Yes, great to be here. Thank you.
And Shukria Wiar is a community engagement manager and senior planner at Greater Portland Council of Governments. She brings over 20 years of experience in municipal planning in Southern Maine. In her community engagement role, she works with residents, community organizations, and local officials to support informed participation across a range of regional projects from transportation planning to sustainability initiatives. So welcome, Shukria.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
And next we have Chris Lee, who is a veteran on the Home and Energy Chat. So nice to have you back, Chris.
Hey.
Chris, Chris has been at the forefront of ADU development in New England. He is the founder of Backyard ADUs, a leader in offsite construction for ADUs. Drawing on a background in finance and economics, Chris founded Backyard ADUs in response to a broken housing market, seeking to utilize overlooked land right in our backyards and a simpler, more consistent way to build. He started first by managing his own projects, saying, "If I wouldn't have my family live in it, no one should," a perspective that defines the company's transparent, full service approach today, creating quality housing that families can call home. He oversees a growing multi-state team and a new ADU every week alongside major multifamily developments. So welcome, Chris.
Hey.
So a reminder, if you have just joined us, if you do have questions, please feel free to add them using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our very best to get to them at the end of our presentations today. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to Tom, who is going to kick us off and introduce Maine's new ADU guide.
Thank you, Heather. So a few years ago, the Maine legislature, in response to the housing shortage in the state, passed a law, LD 2003, which created more flexibility for property owners and creating ADUs. But they didn't have any funding to educate the public about it. Not a lot of ADUs were built. In Portland in 2004, only 7 ADUs were built. So the state gave us a grant to create a website to help people understand what ADUs are and the process for getting one built. And the rules are different for each municipality because municipalities create their own ordinances for ADUs. And we created a website called the Maine ADU Guide. And I'm going to share my screen so you can see it. And we contracted with a company in California to help us build this website because California is way ahead of Maine. 20% of all new residential construction in California are ADUs. And you can see why, where housing is very expensive in California. And so there's a lot of incentive for property owners to build ADUs. I'm going to just go through this website that in the process help educate you about ADUs, starting with ADU 101. Let's start from the beginning. What is an ADU? They're located on the same lot as a primary residence. So it's not just a small house on a separate lot. It's the same lot. So the owner of the ADU is the owner of that lot. They can be attached, like an addition, or a part of the house, or detached, a separate living space. And some of these ADUs I've seen look like a regular house. They're not necessarily small, depending upon the rules in a town. We also created a FAQ page, and any kind of questions you might have about building an ADU can be found here. I think one of the biggest questions is how much does it cost to build an ADU? And we came up with this estimate. Interior conversions, 30,000 to 100,000, garage conversions, 60 to 150,000, attached new ADUs, 100 to 300,000, and detached ADUs, a standalone house between $200,000 and $500,000. And we developed these numbers after talking to a number of people in the industry. The big advantage of an ADU, when you're building a new house, is the cost of land. But on an ADU, there is no cost. That's where the savings are. The land is already there. It's like a driveway or a backyard. And so really the cost is only the construction itself. And we develop these resources. For example, this ADU professionals directory. And we keep adding to this as people learn about the site. There are special loans available for ADUs. Kenny Bunk Savings and also Bangor Savings have loans. And here are the companies that are building ADUs. And in Maine, one of the things I've learned is a lot of the ADUs are prefab modular buildings that are made somewhere else and brought in and with a crane and installed on a site. And labor costs are high in Maine. And by building in this way, they can lower the costs and make the ADUs more affordable. You'll see there are more prefab companies on the site than stick-built companies. And I'm a former newspaper reporter, and I was interested in meeting people who have ADUs. And this is where I learned the most about ADUs. I found that people who build them are doing it for the families. They're not, most of the time, they're not building it as a thinking they're going to rent it out and make money. They're doing it for their parents or their adult children. And a lot of these stories are heartwarming. For example, I was driving down the street in Portland and I saw what looked like an ADU. And I just knocked on the door. I said, "Is this an ADU?" And sure enough, it was. And here are these two brothers, two elderly brothers. One is rich; he's a retired like law professor, and the young brother spent his life as an adventurer, like sailing around the world, sailed to Australia. The younger brother doesn't have any savings. He's like living in a government housing in Seattle, and he has Parkinson's disease. And the family's worried about him. He's living all alone in Seattle. So the rich brother builds an ADU in his backyard here in Portland, and the other brother comes in and loves it, and they can kind of keep an eye on him. Here's a typical story where Judy is a widow, lives in Yarmouth. She has a big house in Yarmouth. Taxes keep going up. It's hard to maintain. So she sells the house and uses the profits to build an ADU in Pownell, right next door to a house owned by her son. So she plans eventually, when she dies, to pass on the house to her son. The son owns the house, right? So but she's living in this house with no rent, no mortgage, and she gets to be next door to her son and her granddaughter. This is Claire. Claire was a beautiful ADU. This is a backyard ADU, modular building, beautiful. And Claire lived in the southern state. Her husband has a serious illness. Her daughter is worried, but the housing costs in Portland are like more expensive than they were from. So the daughter builds an ADU in her side yard right here, and I want to just kind of take you inside. There's the mom and daughter, and what an ADU does is the parent can be close, but she could be independent. They're look at this is a beautiful inside. So there's privacy in addition to being close by. I love these stories. Now, Mark and Lynn, they're from California, Mark and Lynn. But you think people from California are like rich, but they actually from Fresno, kind of a rural farm area, and they wanted to be closer to their daughter. And they found that Portland housing was more expensive. So the way to make it work out, they tore down a garage and built this ADU in its place. And here you can see how close the garage is. And they have a nice garden in the back, which they share with the daughter. I like this picture. And, I guess if you're retired, you can live in a big house in like Florida, or you can like live in Maine and live next door to your daughter and your grandchildren. And before the grandchildren go off to school in the morning, they come over and say hi. And you could give them a hug before they go to school. So I think I'd like to do that rather than living in a big house in Florida. But not all ADUs are for families. In South Portland, Terry wanted to build an addition to her house, which is very small, and found it was cheaper to build an ADU, have it brought in here, put in the backyard, and she's using that as an office for now, but she's thinking maybe in the future they could have their parents live there, or maybe if there's some economic crisis in the family, they could rent it out and have more income. This is ADU was built as a high-end ADU, and it's big, and it's built with 17-inch walls that are filled with straw, built by a company called Croft. And finally, you can take an existing structure and turn into an ADU. This was a art studio in Yarmouth, and Janice wanted to turn it into like a one studio apartment, and the town would not allow her to do that. The neighbor fought it. She got rejected. So this building is empty. Finally, LD 2003 passes, and the town can no longer prevent this from happening. And now she has a lovely tenant who can help her with the garden, feed the cat when she's away, and kind of lift big things. And she gets $1,800 a month for rent that she can use to offset property taxes and utility costs. And finally, I want to talk to you about this blog we have, in which I want to point out we have a couple of podcasts, with people. Here's Carrie from South Portland talking about the South Buildings ADU in South Portland. And also we have another podcast where we talk with some lenders and a builder. And changing the site all the time. I got a complaint that said you don't have any designs for people who have accessibility needs, and so we had this blog about designs for people that are older people with disabilities. And think about this: if you're building an ADU for your parent, think ahead of time. What's it going to be like in 10 years? Can you build it so that they could still use the ADU? I want to turn over the presentation to Shukria, who is a planner. And because she's a planner, she was able to translate a lot of the planning language into ordinary language so people can understand. So why don't you take it over, Shukria?
Thank you, Tom. Tom will be driving for me a little bit. So building an ADU does feel overwhelming at first. This guide breaks the process into simple steps. So you can take it in one piece at a time. You don't have to do everything at once, but you do have to have and you don't have to be an expert to get started. So I'm gonna go through all just to take out make it less demystifying what this ADU journey could look like. So for this ADU rules page, we'll start here to understand the local and state regulations. This is the best place to begin. Every town has its own rules about ADUs, like how big they can be, where they can go on your property, or whether the owner needs to live on site. Learning the rules can easily help you avoid surprises later on and figure out what's possible on your property. So there's no surprises in the coming. You know what the regulation is asking you and understanding that. As this page, as well as other pages, they have step-by-steps on each page that you can go through. The inspiration, once you know the basic, this section helps you imagine what your ADU could look like. Tom giving us the different stories as to why people are utilizing it, from family to aging in place to income. This helps you. This is, as Tom had looked, there was, again, getting inspired, and there were step-by-step ways to do that. Budgeting, everybody wants to know the budgeting of this. If you look at the Q&A section, there's that cost of the building an ADU that Tom had gone through. This tip is all about understanding and addressing construction costs, soft costs, and the ongoing expenses, the utilities being the ongoing expenses. Building an ADU involves more than the construction. Need to think about design, permits, and utilities. This section helps plan realistically and explore the financing options that you can move forward with confidence, and you know what all of your options might be in regard to, banks giving you loans, permitting, all of that. And the design is where your ideas start taking shape. This focuses on creating an ADU that fits the property, your neighborhood, and your homeowner's needs. This this all focuses on space that works for you and your needs, but also, focuses on what the local requirements might be for your town or your city. Good design can also make the permitting process smoother and avoid changes later. When you know what you have for options and what you know what to work with, that makes things much easier on your side as well as the contractors that for construction as well as the town that you're going to be working with. And then we have the permitting. Before construction begins, you'll need approval from your town, of course. This section walks you through working with local code enforcement officers, working with the local planning office, if that may be. A lot of these ADUs are by right, so most likely you're going to be working with the code enforcement office of your town. It explains what you expect when applying for permits and working with your local code enforcement. And the code enforcement can look like, your ratings for your walls, your roof, everything. But it is normal to have questions, and this step encourages any early communication to keep things moving and having that conversation with your entity at your the town office. It normalizes the process by explaining reviews, timelines, and common requirements. And once you have your permitting, then you have construction. This is the final step, building your ADU. Here, the final phase is where your plans, your design become your reality. Here you'll find guidance on working with contractors, questions to ask the contractors, inspections and staying organized during the construction. Reinforces us the importance of staying organized and informed through the completion. So this will give you all your 101s about, from town to construction to, permitting. Once this step is complete, your ADU is basically ready to use, and you can utilize it for whatever you have built it for. Um, just one important thing just to remember that every ADU project is different. You might move through these steps in slightly different order, and that's okay. Portland have seen these, and they can move much faster than, a town somewhere in northern Maine that hasn't seen things like this. So just patience is good. This guide is here to help you understand the process, find reliable information, and taking the next step when you're ready.
Thank
So
you.
I'm gonna go give it back to Tom because he's gonna talk about we have this amazing ADU wizard, and I'm gonna let Tom handle that because I think it's wonderful.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So thank you, Shukriya. And I want everybody to open up a tab and type in Maine ADU Guide.org. Maine ADU Guide.org. And you're on our website. And initially, all the towns have different rules. Like in Portland, you can build two ADUs, for example. Other towns are much more restrictive. And we began to reach out to towns to try to kind of, have a tab just all the different rules. But there are like 500 towns in Maine, and we ended up contracting with a company in Massachusetts that's using AI to help residents statewide figure out if they could build an ADU on their lot and what size. Of course, it's not a perfect site. We had to put lots of disclaimers. It really struggles with shoreland zoning, uh, for example. But if you just type in your address of your house, and then Heather, where do you live? Can we look in your house? Can you give me your address? I can't hear you, Heather. Oh,
Sorry, I was muted. I don't know if I want to put my personal
oh,
address on here, but let's just pick an example. Let's just say, how about 15 Brown Street in Westbrook.
All right.
I don't even know if that exists, but off the top of my head.
We need a street that exists. But I think Brown
Oh,
Street,
there's one in Portland. It looks like it's pulling up Brown Street in Portland.
all right. Because I look at my home address, it already told me I cannot build an ADU because the lot is
Jeez.
not big enough. And so, oh, Brown Street and Westbrook, Portland not allowed. I bet it's not going to be allowed in Westbrook because the houses there are really small. Uh,
Oops. It was the second one down there.
Probably allowed, like in-home apartment, probably allowed. Um, and let's see. I might try another address. Here's Gorham. Take a look. I bet it's allowed. All right. Backyard cottage, probably allowed. And then it'll show you the house in Gorham. And you could try a house on a lot. And it'll show you a lot. And it'll show you all right, here's the house. And it shows you because where on your lot an ADU can fit. And because of setback requirements in Gorham, the ADU can only fit at this tiny little corner here. It looks
Hmm.
like, I think. No, you can put
No,
it,
no, no.
there you go.
So the dash lines are all your setbacks,
So you can put
and
it, you can take your house and put it anywhere in this big
yeah,
lot.
Yeah, Tom, if
exactly.
you go to the bottom right and go to the eagle eye layer so you can see the trees and the features, it gets
Oh
even
yeah.
more useful. And the bot, it's down yeah, click that one.
All
There you
right.
go. Now you can position it without
Now you
cutting
can really
trees
see the
down.
house. All right. So if you live in 138 Main Street in Gorham, you have like a lot of options. And you could have in this website kind of basically you're not going to like go to a builder and say, build me this, but this kind of gives you an idea just to start brainstorming. And you
That's
can
a great
actually build
resource.
quite a large ADU here. And so and then down here you check with your town. You're not going to do anything without checking your town. And if you fill out that form, where you live, your address, and click send, we have this program that it will go either to the town planner or to the town code enforcement officer. And you can say, you're interested in ADU, this is where I live, what are my options? How do I start?
That's
Um,
great.
so, so that's the end of my presentation. I'm now I'll turn it back to Heather.
Yeah, thank you. That was a nice overview of a fabulous new tool. So thank you for introducing our viewers to that. Um, and I wonder if before we launch into Chris, if somebody wants to um, just say so LD 2003 made it, my understanding is made it legal across the state for any homeowner across the state to add an ADU. And it established minimums, and then it let the municipalities make the rules less restrictive, but not more restrictive. Is that correct?
Yes, that is
Okay.
absolutely correct. They
Yeah.
just allowed us because looking at local ordinances, some people did not, some ordinance did not allow it. So this was across the board. Yes, you're allowed to have an ADU. And as Tom mentioned, in Portland, they're allowed to have two if your property allows it. Yep.
And Cape Elizabeth, that was very controversial, and they decided they just want to do the bare limit.
Right.
And also, one thing I discovered is that if you have property in the unorganized territories, this law does not apply to your property.
Hmm.
Those territories do not get more flexibility. although there is some legislative efforts to.
Unify that. Well, great. Well, let's thank you both, Shukria and Tom, for that introduction. And at this point, I want to turn it over to Chris, who, as I mentioned, has really been at the forefront of building ADUs. When did backyard ADUs start, Chris? I didn't have that year in your bio.
Yeah, we put a website up in September of 2019, and the first person said they want to do it in like 2 weeks later.
Yeah, so
And then
really at the cutting edge of ADU expansion. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris, to talk a little bit about the work that you do and also some of the important information around site evaluations and the efficiency of ADUs compared to larger primary homes.
yeah, thanks, Heather. Well, you already gave a really good introduction to me and backyard, but this is backyard team on the right a couple of years ago, but we're based out of Brunswick. I live in Brunswick. The model home is 100 yards from the house that I live in, and we've got a model home down on Cape Cod now. But we're all about building little houses, and we've started growing in trying to using design build modular to do infill projects as well throughout the state. And as Heather said, we're up to an ADU a week right now, and we're doing everything we possibly can to get to two a week by the end of the year, because there's so many people that want to build these. Um, and we've got teams in Maine and Mass, but most of us are here in and around Portland. Next. So we do a lot of detached ADUs. This is a detached ADU we did. It was down in Cape Cod, and it was a bigger one. It's 1,000 square feet. But it's there. It's in someone's backyard. Detached ADUs aren't necessarily the cheapest ADU to build. I think the cheapest ADU to build is a garage that was built in the 1990s on a full foundation that's frost protected with a drywall already. You can convert that pretty cheap, but unfortunately, those are really rare in Maine. Um, but we do detached ADUs honestly because it's a lot easier to plan and spec. We can look at grass, we can look at grading, we can figure out the utilities, and the planning doesn't have to worry about the peculiarities of a house built in the late 1800s or early 1900s and what it means to bring those up to code or be true to the architecture of an old farmhouse or something like that. So that's why we do detached ADUs. And we do attach them, but we typically attach with a breezeway or a simpler architectural detail. Um, and that was we mostly do that when towns require it, or if the homeowners want to move between the houses without going outside. Next, let's skip this one. I think Tom covered this with the ADU site. So what I want to do quickly is give you some pointers on evaluating your site because the question always comes out like, what do you do first? And how can you get to deal breaker as quickly as possible so you don't waste your time and money pursuing an ADU project? Um, and I brief here, there aren't really going to be zoning blocks. You can do this in all areas. The question is going to be, is it going to fit in the setbacks that are allowed in your town? Is it going to fit with some shoreland requirements, proximity to rivers or streams? And can you stomach the constraints? And those are best found out by talking directly to the town, honestly, and asking them good pointed questions. And honestly, you can get that with that ADU wizard tool. It's reasonably accurate as far as setbacks go and trying to figure out where you can position one of these buildings. But I'm going to talk quickly about the utilities because these are the things that can make or break a budget, and are somewhat difficult to nail down. You'll get six different opinions from six different people, but it's not rocket science, and you can at least get going in the right direction. Next. So first one is evaluating your water service. So basically you're dealing with something that's moderate complexity. You might need to have four different people to the property to figure this out. And it can have a budget impact really up to 20 grand. And that 20 grand number is a new water service connection on Forest Ave or a new well that's drilling deeper than 450, 600 feet. So those are kind of the two big issues. And then occasionally dealing with water filtration with like arsenic or radon or something like that. But public water connections are pretty easy. You're going to go in your basement. You're going to try to find out where your water meter is. In most main basements, they're not concealed. They're just sticking out of the front wall of the house. And you're trying to figure out how big is that pipe. Generally, you want greater than 3/4 inch. You're trying to figure out what your meter size is. Most single family homes have a 5/8 meter, but you probably want to upgrade that to 3/4 inch. And then you're looking at the distance to the public connection. Water pressure drops the further you are from that primary connection. So if you have a really deep lot, 150 feet, 200 feet, you may have issues with water pressure, even though you have a bigger water service side. And this becomes a bigger issue if there's a sprinkler requirement. And luckily, the state passed some rules around sprinklers, but if you're greater than 50 feet from the public right away in Portland, for example, they're probably going to still try to peg you for sprinklers. So anyway, that's the public. It's size of pipe, material of the pipe, and kind of that distance to the connection point. Wells are somewhat similar. There's only a few things to look at, but the big one is your refill rate. How quickly does the well recover after you draw it down? So if you think that well is a big, long, skinny tube about 10 inches wide, there's an amount of water stored in there. And at night, you're using 5 gallons of water a minute at peak. You're going to draw that down and you want it to recover. So you got to figure out what that refill rate is. And sometimes it's on the backside of your well cap. But you could call a well company and they will basically suck all the water out of the well and time how long it takes to fill back up to figure that out. Pump size, this is something to figure out. Pumps have a certain capacity. Typical well pumps are going to start at 12 gallons per minute, which is usually sufficient if you have the correctly sized pressure tanks. And then water quality is another one. I generally say if you don't already have a filtration system and you're drinking the well water, it's probably okay. But you can always double check that with a water quality test. Next. So next one is sewer and septic. This one can be a pretty big range, and uh, overall, the budget impact of this could be up to 50K. Quite honestly, that's a number that you only ever see in Massachusetts. In Maine, the max septic you're going to see is 25 to 30 grand, and that's a really bad scenario. That's building a septic on the side of a hill and bringing in 500 yards of fill material, and then needing like a Fuji style water treatment tank in front of it. But more often than not, a new septic in Maine costs less than $20,000 and is relatively easy to design. But septic, when you are evaluating your septic system, uh, whether or not you can add a ADU to use that septic is primarily driven by your bedroom count. And each bedroom count is assigned a certain flow rate of water. And the leach field is actually the bottleneck in your septic system. A leach field is designed to absorb a certain amount of water. So you're looking at bedroom count, you're looking at that leach field. In Maine, some shoreland zones are starting to have these low nitrogen requirements. And this is something you'd be looking at, which may require you to do one of those Fuji tanks, which are um, they're becoming more common in Mass and starting to pick up in Maine and can be an additional expense. And then grades and pumps. Are you downhill from where you're trying to eject sewage? And then percolation and groundwater is the other thing that drives the cost of the septic, and that basically says how big is your field going to be and how much work is it going to be to build it. Public is a lot easier. You're just trying to make sure you can flow downhill to where it's going to connect to the street or in your basement, and the condition of the pipe. Make sure you don't have an old clay pipe that was installed a long time ago. And the craziest pipe we've ever seen was in South Portland. It was what was it made of? It was made of newspaper and resin. It was pretty crazy. I didn't know they did that, but that's what it was, and it was in South Portland. We recommended that one get replaced. DPW requirements are starting to creep up. It's not super common, but be cautious in Portland and Gorham. They have their own opinions about the best way to connect sewer from an ADU, and they're both different and they're both right. So that's kind of a trend with DPW. Just keep an eye out, and I would check that early to make sure that they don't have some weird gymnastics that they want your sewer pipe to do to get to the street.
Can you define DPW? Is that Department of Public Works?
Yeah, Department of Public Works. So whoever's managing, it's usually DPW, Department of Public Works. It might be a specific sewer department. Next. Finally, electric. So this one is another potential budget impact up to 20,000. You're mostly just going to see those bigger numbers if you're trying to build far away from the public right away. So the electric services, if you're building a detached ADU, are typically going to be underground. And the further that run gets, it's just going to start getting exponentially more expensive as you go kind of over 100 feet. And then there's another breakpoint at 250 feet where you have to start doubling up wire size and everything to get the correct amps and not have too much issues with the line. But when you're doing this, you're basically looking at your current service size. Most houses are 100 or 200 amps. And then you're looking at what the utilization is. Like if you have a pool, if you already have heat pumps, you're probably going to need to get a new service regardless of if you have 200 amps. But the good news about these two things is an electrician is going to be able to tell you, and it's going to be pretty black and white across electricians. They'll tell you if you can add another 100 amp service or another 200 amp service to that, or if you're doing a detached ADU with a shared heating system, maybe you only need to do like a 60 amp sub breaker. But it's pretty straightforward. Working with an electrician, and then as you work through it, the CMP is going to come into this and give some guidance on whether or not your strategy with the electrician is going to get approved. And most often than not, it does. The only scenarios is if you're really far off the street. If you're trying to build hundreds of feet in your backyard or you're off grid or something like that. Next. I guess in time, let's skip this one. So let's talk a little bit about energy efficiency in small, because this is an interesting subject when you're getting into building sub 1,000 square foot structures. Next. So this is an actual HERS report from one of our ADUs. If people are familiar with HERS, basically it's a 0 to 100 scale. 100 being an average house, and then the lower you are, the better. So this is 39th percentile of houses. The thing about small houses is you reach this point of diminishing marginal returns of your envelope insulation a lot faster than bigger houses. So you can picture the walls are defending less airspace and trying to keep less heat in. And if you look at the breakdown of where your money is going in terms of distribution, so the total annual energy cost of this is $1,700. Of that, only 550 is heating, less than a third. So you can imagine if you're trying to make this house more efficient, you probably don't go to double studded walls or triple pane windows because you're only trying to reduce $500 a year. So you're stuck looking at this thing where, wow, lights and appliances are actually the driver of the cost of my annual consumption in my ADU. So it kind of turns it on its head about what do you do? And it's a new way of looking at energy efficiency. You don't just always add the extra layer of insulation. And the other part of this that will decrease the load, but in the world of energy efficiency right now and saving the planet, and we're thinking about embodied carbon, if you add another layer of XPS insulation under your foundation, the payback period on that can be over 30 years. And who knows? Maybe the world has been totally overrun with global warming in 30 years, and we needed to have not produced that board of XPS today. So it's an important thing to think about and putting your money into maybe a heat pump dryer instead of triple pane windows. Next. So this is that concept I was mentioning, diminishing marginal return. So all houses hit this at some point. The bigger the house, the later you catch that. But at some point, the next thing you do is not worth the dollars to do it and also not worth the embodied carbon to do it. And the way to figure that out is to work with an energy modeler. But generally speaking, if you're under 1,000 square feet, you're going to hit it pretty quick. And for example, our wall assembly is an inch and a half of polyiso, a 2x6 wall with R21 fiberglass, and that's where we hit it, which is not double stud. It's surprisingly low. It's an R30 wall, but that's where we're at with our HERS modeling. Next. I guess we can skip this. This is Massachusetts. So budgets. Next slide, and we'll look at some budgets. So the big thing here, I've been saying this for 3 or 4 years now, but budgets are just fully untenable. Like it's wild how much stuff costs these days. ADUs are still the cheapest thing you can build. They're cheaper than an apartment in a new apartment building subsidized by Maine Housing. They're cheaper than a market rate apartment built in Portland by a developer. They're cheaper than a new house, and there's all kinds of reasons for that, but it's still pretty expensive. We've seen prices they've gone up by at least 50% since we got started. And our average ADU now is 300,000 for a 900 square foot ADU with all of the things in it, water, septic, electric. And the cheapest that we've done recently is 235,000. So it's a lot more expensive than it used to be. Next. The other thing about budgeting for these small houses it's the distribution of where the money is going is completely upside down compared to typical construction. So foundation up, the number that is usually quoted with a per square foot price, is not really relevant when you're looking at the cost of a small home because it's only cost of the home 40%. It's less than half the budget. The rest is foundation and utilities, site prep and landscaping, planning and design. So when you're running around looking to get estimates, try to move away from the per square foot price because it's going to blow up very quick. And an example is this, our 800 square foot ADU, all in, it can be $343 a square, but our 500 square foot ADU is $490. So if you're trying to figure out if you're getting a number that's $275 a square or $350 a square, it can be almost irrelevant based on your site conditions or level of windows that you try to do. So make sure you're looking to get all in numbers and set a budget for the project rather than a budget per square foot. Next. And this is just kind of highlighting why it's so important. And it's just basically a math problem. Your fancy toilet can be $6 a square. Underground electric can add $13 a square. Loaming and seating, driveway, like this stuff adds up a lot faster when you're trying to hit a budget of 275 versus higher. And you can see all of the new houses that come online in subdivisions in southern Maine and up to Brunswick, they all come in at $750,000, and all of these numbers disappear in that big number a lot faster. So keep that in mind. Next, and I think that was it. And yeah, just to close on a note, ADUs are still cheaper. They're not super cheap, but they are cheaper. The space conversions in garages are the cheapest way to do this. If you're going to throw sweat equity into it, I think you can get that number a lot under 150. But I don't think you're realistically going to get too much under 75,000 just because of the cost of materials just to purchase at Home Depot. It adds up very fast, but it's doable. Detached ADUs, like I said, we're around 300,000. We can push that down to the low 200s, but we haven't done anything under 200,000 for many years. And then you've got new single family homes, which have a similar basis but have land, and then new apartments are wildly expensive with the amount of soft costs that go into them to get them approved. And with that, I'll hand it back over.
Thank you, Chris. That was super helpful. We have a little bit of time for questions, and we did receive quite a few through the registration process. So I'm going to jump in, and hopefully we can move through answers quickly so that we can get to more of them. First one is, does an ADU need to be physically connected to the main house And can it be built before the main house? So we know that it doesn't need to be physically connected, but can it be built before the main house is? Not sure who that one might be the best for. Shukria?
Yeah, I would check with the town, but I would think that it seems like if someone wants to build the ADU before the main house goes in and live there until, whatever the situation might be, but I believe it could be done as long as the ADU goes through the process, get the, final COs and everything like that. I cannot see right now, but I always tend to say, please check with your local authorities.
Yeah. I actually have some friends that built essentially an ADU in Brunswick on their lot first while they constructed their larger home. So I don't know if that was something Brunswick specific.
No, you
Uh,
you just permit it as a single family home first, and then make sure that your size is proportional to what you want your single family house to be. So Brunswick, what is it, 33% or greater for the main house? So like if you built 1,000 square foot house, your main house might have to be 3,000 square feet. But it's definitely
if you do
doable.
it that way.
It's just like the order of permitting and what do you call it when you build it initially.
That's great. That's helpful. Are ADUs and additions of the same size taxed and valued the same? And can an ADU be converted into an addition down the road? I don't know who wants to take a stab at that one.
Um,
Shakria?
Yeah,
Chris?
I'm trying to think of I would think that ADU might have a greater value than an addition to a house. So in that way, because it does have separated and it's utilized as a separate living entity. So I think it could be it is would be more value than having a plain addition that's more square footage that will be added to the main house.
Makes
Yep,
sense.
it definitely will be. Freddie Mac updated their appraisal guidelines probably 2 or 3 years ago that put ADUs into an appraisal category that makes them look more like a full unit. So it definitely is going to add more assessed value and appraisal value to the house than the addition. But theoretically, you could convert that back. And if you're worried about taxes, um, I don't know. It'd probably be challenging to get that your city assessments updated, but I think all the cities have a process to do that
Mhm.
as needed if you have special requests.
Great. Chris, what do you think the 10-year trends will be on ADUs?
Yeah, I think we're in, so California, I would say is like they're in year 10, maybe year 12 right now. And it took them a solid 7 years to get to the point where there was a supply of builders and designers ready to fulfill the demand.
Mhm.
Here we have the demand. Um, in Maine, we have the demand, but prices are too high.
Hmm.
Even they're just too high. But I think we probably in the next 3 years we see more builders and designers coming in being able to do this at lower prices. And then we're probably going to be in the same situation where it's leading building permits, just like the West Coast is 20% in California permits are ADUs. We're in a similar situation where we need the lower cost option, and every backyard can take one. So it's going to happen for sure. And it's again closer to home. It's happening in Massachusetts a little bit faster than Maine. There's similar. The state level zoning is equally as permissive as Maine, but average incomes in Mass are significantly higher. They're up closer to 100,000 in a lot of the areas. Maine is under 60 or right around 60. So, but the construction cost is the same. So we're in a situation where we've got to break through the high interest rate environment, or we need to have something that allows it just to be more affordable on a relative basis.
Okay. Next question is, do you have any recommendations for affordable site surveys for a boundary survey? I don't know who
I,
makes the most sense on that one.
Tom, is there anyone that's put their name on the GBCOG website, or is that on?
Yeah, I think if you go on under resources. Um, there is a permitting and site design managers, Acorn Engineering Incorporated.
Great.
Um, One thing I would add to that, though, I don't know how far along that person who asked is in their process, but I wouldn't spend money on a survey until you've checked off the financing bucket and checked off the utilities bucket, and also made sure that whoever you think is going to live in it wants to live in it. Because the survey is going to be, it's going to cost you at least 3,000, maybe four for the survey. And then if you engage Acorn to do the civil, it's going to be another 6 to 10. And that information isn't going to reveal a make or break unless you're in a really tight lot. Use the ADU wizard to get the survey information and then go outside with a tape measure and start there. But you probably don't need that level of accuracy at the beginning stages of your process.
Good tip. Next question says, I can't afford to max out the allowable square footage right now. Can it be done in stages across multiple buildings? I imagine that's also going to be town dependent based on the number of units.
Yeah. Yeah, and how it phases, depending what they want to do. You can definitely do any construction project in phases.
I just want to point out too, I know we've said that each municipality has different requirements. When you were going through the stories, Tom, one of those, I think it was the last one, maybe it was in Belfast, I believe it was built by Croft, was a pretty good size house. It was a 1,300 square foot house, which is larger than what I normally think of for an ADU. But it sounds like that must have been a size that was voted to be allowable by that community, whereas some other communities in southern Maine might set their limit at 800 or less.
Yes.
Question around how does a community maintain its rural character and still address the new ADU regulations and guidance? So you've really built in lots of communities, Chris. You have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, ADUs are gentle increases in density, and they typically don't overwhelm a street or a town, even though they're legal everywhere. So they're really the perfect way to preserve rural character and gently increase density. It means that you're going to put an ADU behind or beside someone's house instead of cutting down the swath of trees across the street and adding a new driveway. So the premise of the question, probably nervous about overdevelopment of ADUs in rural towns, but I would say it's not going to happen. You might see a handful. And the owner who lives in that community with you is going to want to preserve it too. And it's probably for their parents. So it's a great way to ensure that happens.
All right, last question we have time for comes from somebody living in Portland in the historical district. Assuming that they will be restricted from adding an ADU, does that seem likely to you as well, or what are the most possible options for them, most realistic options?
I do know that Portland has one of the most flexible rules around ADUs in the state. And that's a conversation for the code enforcement officer.
I would echo that. Well, there's design guidelines and building in Portland, just working with Portland for a few years. ADU, if zoning allows it, which meaning you meeting your setback, your lot area and everything. The only thing with a historic district is you may have to fit it in within the neighborhood, within
Okay.
your the design needs to fit within your house as well, and most likely has to be kind of further from the street and kind of tucked behind. But yes, it's possible, and I think the conversation would need to start with the historic preservation and letting them know what's going on.
Great. Well, we have come to the end of our chat for today. I feel like this one could go on for a couple of hours. We just scratched the surface, and there's so many things we could dive into. I'm sure there are lots of unanswered questions. But you have all offered to share your contact information for any questions that we didn't get to. So thank you all thank you, Tom, Chris, and Shukria for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and expertise and for introducing the new Maine ADU guide. I think it's a fantastic resource, a nice comprehensive resource for Mainers. So I really appreciate that. Thank you again to our sponsors, Royal River Heat Pumps and Kennybunk Savings. And thank you to Maggie Perkins, who's been managing everything behind the scenes so beautifully. You can learn about future home and energy chats on our website, catch up on past episodes where we do post all the recordings there. This episode will be posted within the week. So if you had to log off, well, I guess if you logged off early, you're not here anymore. But if you want to share it with anyone else in your community, feel free to check back in a week or so. We'll also send an email when the link goes live, and we will include contact information for our presenters. So there will be a short survey that pops up at the end of today's session. We'd love your feedback on how it went, and if you have ideas for future topics, please keep an eye out for that. So once again, thank you for joining us today, and hope you enjoy this beautiful sunny afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.